Well, I am going to kick us off and get us started because we're at 10 o'clock here. So I wanted to thank everyone for and welcome you to today's Managing Broker meeting. Your commitment to the real estate profession and just presence here today is shown just for being here. So, you know, just having you as a window of opportunity to have communication with our managing brokers is so important. And I had started thinking about it. I was like, okay, so if we had 40 people, 40 of our managing brokers, and we have 200, that's 20% of our managing brokers on the call today. So, you know, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room, I think, where we have some growth. But I guess with the future, you know, we are looking at offering opportunities in this new hybrid method of online and in person, hopefully very soon. So that's something to think about here this morning. But I just wanted to give you guys just a couple of reminders about the session today. Everyone is muted, and if you have any sort of questions, you can put them in the chat box, or you can just raise your hand and we can unmute you, and then you can ask your question that way. So if that's the best way to go about that. And we are also recording today's session, so those that couldn't attend hopefully will watch the program and learn some of this great information in this ever-changing environment of real estate that we're in. So now I just wanted to welcome our wonderful sponsor we have today. Jeff Kingery is our sponsor. He's an affiliate member of ours, and he is, I'll turn it over to you, Jeff. It looks like you're still muted.
How about now? All right, I've got to be the one that was muted. Well, thank you for inviting me to your meeting. My name is Jeff Kingery. I am with K2 Lending, and a little background on myself. I grew up in Colorado. I've been in mortgage lending for 20 years now. I spent 12 of those years as a broker, meaning I can place the loan with whoever's got the best rates on those days or the best program that fits the client's needs. I also spent 8 years with a major bank, so I've seen both sides of the lending world. Myself, I moved to the mountains about 7 years ago. I've always been drawn here. I grew up down on the Front Range, and I definitely learned a lot about lending in a mountain town. The clients, number one, are probably the biggest difference you see up here versus in a metropolitan area is they have more complex financial profiles, whether that means they own multiple properties or they're self-employed or they have multiple businesses, all which make it a little different, in some cases more complicated to explain the program to them. Primarily what we do is we have 35 different banks at our disposal for a number of reasons. Out of those 35, realistically, we use about 5 to 10 of them for 90% of our transactions. And what we try to do is we're able to get them approved through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on our own system. We can get a pre-approval out any day of the week. Saturday or Sundays are fine with me. Once we have them approved with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, we can place them with whoever is offering the best rate at that time, which is obviously their biggest concern. So we can start there. That's probably 90% of what we do. But being in a mountain community, I've definitely learned and expanded. There's a lot more properties up here. If it's at the base of a mountain, we run into issues with condotel. I'm sure everyone's had that story. Non-warrantable condos. I've got programs for affluent people who don't show all their income on their tax returns and therefore makes it difficult to get them a loan. These are a lot of things we face up here. I've always joked that once the affluent client gets wealthy, the next thing they do is they shelter it from their taxes, which makes it difficult when it comes time to get a mortgage. So we've got all sorts of programs like that, and I just want to be a resource for everybody. I've done this a long time. I just want to let everybody know I'm here. I'm very experienced with what happens in mountain towns, and I know what to look at first, especially when it comes to HOAs. And condos are probably the most difficult thing in a mountain town, in a resort area. To have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back those loans, there's certain things we have to do immediately. But more than anything, I just wanted to introduce myself, say hello. I just joined the Vail Board of Realtors this year. This is my first year. I've been part of the Summit County Board for 7 years, and I am local. I do sit here in Frisco, Colorado, and just a couple other things I wanted to touch on is the pre-approvals versus a pre-qual. We always take that extra step, especially in this market. We get them a pre-approval. That means I've seen their documents. I know that their income's going to qualify them for the loan, versus just sometimes in the past, people would just make an application and we would take their word for it and send out the pre-qual letter. We do pre-approval letters, meaning that we're going to ask them to see their tax returns. We're going to make sure that this loan's going to go through. I also double check the property, make sure the property is going to be something we can deal with. If they want to use their own lender, I'm sure everybody on this call has had a client that wants to use their own lender. I think in general, from what I've experienced, everyone would like to work with somebody local just because we know the ins and outs. Somebody who's underwriting this in a different state may not understand we're in a resort town. And there's differences. So, here's the thing. I want to build a relationship with each one of you. If I need to get on the phone and talk to their hometown lender and explain to them what they need to do so they don't inadvertently do something on a condo or a condotel that's going to get the loan in trouble. I'm here to do that just because it's worth my time if I can build a relationship with you. I also feel like when I talk to these people, my foot's in the door and I can also get that business as well. So that's it. Hopefully I'm here to help you win a bid. I try to get the client in a position where they can bid quickly. I can read their tax returns. I can look at their income very quickly, get a lender letter out any day of the week. And that's kind of, that's where I come in. I spend a lot of time on the phone with people. I make sure they're very comfortable with me. I used to underwrite files. I've closed on files. So I think I know pretty much every angle of it by now. And I have no problem sitting on the phone with people, making sure they're very comfortable with what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. Mel did put your contact information in the chat. So if you guys want to reach out to Jeff, his contact information is available there. So thank you so much for sponsoring today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, now I'm going to turn it.
Erica, you just got muted.
Yeah, I see that. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott Peterson. He's going to present today about the Code of Ethics Standard of Practice 10-5, which has been changed recently, along with having a little bit of an update from the NAR-DOG MLS rules changes. So he's got a lot to share with us today, and I'm so happy to have you here on the call today, Scott. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Erica. Are you ready for me?
Yep, I just unshared my screen, so if you want to take over, you can do that.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Erica. Thanks, Jeff, for your sponsorship. And Erica's doing such a great job for you guys up there. It's been nice to watch her ascend in the VBR ranks and really take on a great association in a really fantastic manner. So thanks for everything you're doing, and thanks for putting this together. I see my buddy Kevin is on the screen here. He still has that post-honeymoon glow to him, which is quite impressive. Well, he found somebody to marry him, which is super impressive. I'm just giving him a hard time. He's a good guy, as you guys all know. And I was jealous as I was looking on Facebook at some of those honeymoon pictures. It looked like a phenomenal experience. And I think we were probably, in that phase of, 0-degree weather for a few days. So I was quite jealous. But well, I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'll share my screen in just a second. But as Erica alluded to, the topics that I'm going to hit on is there's 3 broad categories. 2 of them I'm going to spend time on, and then the third is kind of more of a cautionary or some additional thoughts related to the same thing. But generally, it has to do with speech and social media use and those kinds of things. And we're in a really interesting time. We're at an intersection of a number of things going on at several levels of our country and our society, and so it's been a long year for a lot of reasons, including COVID. The other thing I want to mention is I was just looking, and the very last live thing that I did pre-COVID was in your conference room at VBR on March 12th of 2020, and then I think I came home from Vail, and that weekend it was like, the world all kind of came crashing down. Everything sort of ended, and so the good news is the first live thing that I've done since COVID started, I did yesterday morning here just locally in Denver. So hopefully we're all heading out in that direction. And hopefully that's the last I'm really going to have to talk about COVID today. And we can talk about some other things. So a full circle, and I look forward to the time when I can get back up there and spend time in person with you guys. So categories that I'm going to hit on this morning. One is the 10.5 that Erica mentioned, which is the new standard of practice that NAR adopted at their fall board of directors meeting just last year. And there's a couple of derivative aspects to that I'll touch on, and some of my thoughts and implications on that. Second thing I'm going to touch on is antitrust issues generally. And those are flowing from, there's the Zillow's announced acquisition of Showing Time, and some of the online social media chatter that I'm sort of privy to, or that I've seen, the NAR lawsuits and the class action lawsuits, and then there's an NAR-DOG settlement that is currently in the works, and we've got a sort of an inside look on what's coming there, and there's some implications there. But all of that dovetails into social media usage and the antitrust issues, and then the kind of societal stuff in terms of social media usage, and just kind of from a cautionary standpoint for you guys who are managing brokers and supervising broker associates, just stuff to make sure that they're mindful of. So let me share my screen here now, and I've got a PowerPoint. I got disabled from screen sharing, it says, by the host. I promise it's all G-rated. There we go. I've got it now.
Okay.
All right. So first thing I'm going to hit on is this SOP 10.5. And how do I get it? Bear with me here. I'm new to Zoom. Just kidding. Okay. So 10.5. Article 10, Standard of Practice 10-5, and some of the implications and my thoughts on that. This caused kind of quite a stir when NAR passed that. In some areas, this has been a political issue. And so Article 10 overall has been around for many, many years within the Code of Ethics, and that is our kind of what I would say is most analogous to the fair housing laws in terms of realtors within their ethical standards, not discriminating against people in protected classes. And the Code of Ethics essentially mirrors the federally protected classes as opposed to some of the additional protected classes that the states and some municipalities have put on. And so what occurred is they added standard of practice, which, and as you guys probably know, that the SOPs support the article, but they added SOP 10-5 and adopted this at the November board meeting just last year. Went into effect immediately upon adoption. And the gist of what it says is that realtors must not use harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, slurs, or slurs based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So those protected classes. And the keys there are harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, or slurs. So this is in some ways, and when I say it's a political lens, there are certain. I've had a ton of people that are very frustrated by this. A ton of our members, and I've heard from a ton of people that feel like this is a bit overreach. That who's to define harassing speech, hate speech, epithets, slurs? How do we know that? And there's some legitimate arguments there. I mean, our courts in the United States of America, some of the greatest judicial minds in American history, have struggled for generations to define some of these categories. I think hate speech is generally well defined in our sort of federal laws, but harassing speech, a little bit more slippery there. Epithets, slurs. How do we define those things? And in fact, if our state, the state of Colorado, or if our federal government were to pass something similar to this, it's very likely unconstitutional because it would violate the First Amendment, which is the free speech clause. And that's something I want to just knock out of the way right away. This isn't a First Amendment issue, right? This is a NAR, the Code of Ethics. It's a voluntary membership organization. It's not a government actor to whom the First Amendment applies. And so have had a lot of people express, and I've seen a lot of comments online and other places expressing frustration with the intersection between this and the First Amendment. Doesn't apply. Not a government actor. The First Amendment would apply if a government actor, if the town of Vail decided they wanted to implement this, there would potentially be some constitutional issues with that. But NAR doing this, perfectly free to do it. The thing that I think, as opposed to that, one second, I got to let my dog out of my office. Thank you, Rose. Every time I forget, he hangs out in the corner, and then as soon as I get going, he's over here moaning at me to get out. So, so the thing that the SOP update, the 10.5 adoption, has a lot of people in a kerfuffle, right? And the thing that I think is potentially more worthy of being in a kerfuffle is the adoption of Policy Statement 29. So this is the second thing that NAR did at their board of directors meeting last fall. And in adopting this, what they did is essentially expanded the applicability of the Code of Ethics to every aspect of a realtor's life. Prior to November of last year, it was only related to real estate activities that a realtor might undertake that the Code of Ethics would apply, which is logical and makes some sense. But they have expanded the Code of Ethics to apply to every aspect of a realtor's life. And those that have been expressed a little bit more insightful complaints about NAR's moves here probably are more frustrated by this because it feels like overreach. I'm a member of NAR or the Realtor Association because of my business activities, not for social justice issues or not for policing my activities in what I might be doing in other places of my life. And so this is another change, though primarily, obviously, it was directed at supporting the Article 10 and the SOP 10.5 modifications. And the other article that it might apply to is like Article 15, which has to do with speaking poorly of other realtors. But other than that, most of the other articles within the Code of Ethics are really in and of themselves or inherently business related or real estate business related. And so this was done, though, primarily to incorporate 10.5. The third thing that the NAR Board of Directors did at their November meeting is they updated the definition of public trust. And so and this didn't go into effect until January 1st of this year, 2021. So when I wrote this at present, the former definition, I should say, of public trust includes misappropriation of client or customer funds or property. So stealing, conversion, diversion, theft, whatever have you, willful discrimination, or fraud resulting in some substantial economic harm. So defrauding somebody and having some quote unquote substantial economic harm. So in modifying the definition, they expanded that to include any discrimination against any protected classes under Article 10. That's one thing that they did to further expand the violation of a public trust. And then they also included all fraud. So they essentially removed the substantial economic harm fraud. If you perform or commit any fraud, that would be any fraud whatsoever, then that would be a potential violation of the public trust. And so all that really means is that when CAR administers professional standards, ethics, and arbitrations for 29 out of the 31 local associations in the state, including Vail Board of Realtors. And so that sort of falls under my jurisdiction, and I'm counsel to that process and our hearing panelists. And so in the event that our ethics process or our arbitration process uncovered through a complaint and response some violation of the public trust, I would be compelled to refer that to the Division of Real Estate, the state agency. And just so you guys know, it's only happened twice in my 7 years that I've ever referred anything to the Division of Real Estate. So it's not a terribly common thing, but they expanded that. So those are essentially the three things that occurred at the board meeting. So let's talk a little bit about what the implications of these things are. As I mentioned earlier, hate speech has been relatively well defined in our by our courts and by, in some states, by the legislatures. And so we sort of know what that is. It's speech that is on its face offensive. And this is the concept of in the free speech discussion and some of the court cases. You guys have probably heard of yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? That is not protected speech under the First Amendment. Hate speech is, to clarify the definition, the first part of that, yelling fire in a crowded theater, it's objectively unreasonable and dangerous and problematic to anybody under any standard, is the kind of big picture angle that a court would take in looking at speech that would be protected. Hate speech would be the same thing. It's under very objective, clear standards. When somebody says something, there is no doubt that there's something insightful, potentially aggressive, and something that would physically repulse sort of any of us. And I'm not. It's the reason I'm not a jurist, because I'm not necessarily as articulate. But it's the same concept. You know it. You know it when you see it in the sort of panoply of hate speech. Harassing speech, epithets, and slurs, little bit more subjective, and that's one of the concerns that I have in the adoption of this is it's some of that stuff is in the eye of the beholder. What might be harassing to me, or to me what might be a slur, is potentially different than somebody else that maybe is a person of color, or comes from a different brings a different sexual perspective to something. And so this is where I think there's some legitimate concern among members who say, well, what is the standard exactly, and how do we define this stuff? And I would give NAR a ton of credit. They have done an awful lot to support the adoption of this, and they've gotten a lot of blowback in a lot of ways from some people who are frustrated by the attempt to essentially control speech. And so, as I look at our ethics process, my concerns become on the more the more subjective categories, which in my opinion would be the harassing, epithets, and slurs. And specifically, what concerns me is, in our ethics process, the ethics panelists, the hearing panelists, are you. They're realtors. You're not federal or state jurists. You're not constitutional law experts or speech experts. And so I think and inherently there's going to be some subjectivity in the interpretation of all of that. And so I'll come back to kind of how I think that loops in a little bit later. But the thing that it has specifically been clarified by NAR that none of those top four categories include are anything having to do with political speech, demonstrations, advocacy, no matter how theoretically aggressive, or signage, posting signs, removing signs, those kinds of things. And so from a political speech and demonstration standpoint, we have had some, as an example, in the Capitol events that took place back in early January, there were realtors present there, and some of you probably saw in the national media, the realtors present there. NAR came out pretty quickly and said, listen, unless there's additional facts, just them being present there, in other words, if there's additional facts that they are making speech or that they're violating through words 10.5, then just their presence there wouldn't be a violation of this. That's demonstrations, that's political speech, clearly not acceptable in the manner it was all carried out, but not a violation of 10.5. And signage, as an example, You guys probably saw that was even it was certainly a local story here in Denver, but became a nationwide story to some degrees as well. That Realtor was removing signs that essentially were political signs. Just Black Lives Matter signs. She was going and removing those yard signs from the front of people's homes. That activity in and of itself is not speech. It's an action. It's not speech, and would not fall under 10.5 and the limitations that are put there. There are other issues, and the trouble that she got into from her brokerage standpoint, and potentially, I know there have been complaints with the Division of Real Estate, would be trespass and theft and things like that. But this is not something that would fall under our code of ethics. And so understand that distinction. Now, when I say divisive issues statewide, there are people that, I guess there's probably three categories of people as it relates to Article 10 in these changes. There's those that don't know, don't care. They're probably not all that focused on the code of ethics to begin with. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just we've got segments of our realtor population that are very, sort of code of ethics focused, and those that just are, have their heads down. They're a member of the realtor associations, but aren't necessarily, not that they're acting unethically, they're just not paying a lot of attention to any of this. There's those that are very happy that this was changed. They believe that there is an important need for some of these heightened social justice awareness concerns, and feel that this change is a very positive change. And then there's the ones that I generally have heard from as I've been doing these kinds of sessions with groups and getting calls on the legal hotline, and Carr's been getting feedback from, are frustrated. They feel like this is mission drift essentially for NAR. It's a real estate trade association. I'm a member of a business trade association, and to the extent that I have social justice concerns or causes or want to participate in that stuff, there are other venues for us to be doing that. And so those second two categories is kind of what I want to talk about, and that's where the political lens comes sort of into this. So what I've been telling realtors, I think there's something in this for everybody, believe it or not, and that is, if you're of the mindset and belief that this is that NAR's policing sort of this is a good mission for NAR, and it's consistent with the social justice discussion that we're having as a nation over the last year or so, then here you have it. This is an expectation that realtors are going to be promoting and not demoting any of those causes and those important issues that are so much in front of us in these times. And so there's clearly a good thing there. If you are of the mindset that this is mission drift and overreach from NAR, then I would say this, and this is part of it, because NAR does have the social justice angle to this, but there are few entities that I know of that are more protective of the realtor brand or of their own brand than the Realtor Association and NAR. The realtor marks, the realtor logo, the term realtor. I mean, NAR has a 30-page, they call it a marks manual, and it's chock full of explicitly how you can use the realtor marks in your business, right down to font size and colors and all of this other good stuff. And that's been around for a long, long time. They're ferociously protective of the marks because it's an incredibly valuable piece of intellectual property throughout the country, and even in many cases throughout the world. And so part of the board, NAR board of directors logic behind this as well is the fact that this is a realtor brand protection modification as well, because from a business perspective, as we all know, when a realtor does something wrong, when Joe Shopkeeper does something wrong, they say Joe Shopkeeper does something wrong. And I just can't think of a better analogy, but it's not about the industry. It's not about the profession as a whole. When a realtor does something wrong, it is realtor does something wrong, right? That's the headline. That's the news break. And we saw that in the Capitol events, and we saw that in the sign removal example, it's not, nobody can even remember the names of the individuals. What they remember is the realtor did something wrong. And so similarly, when it comes to online speech or verbal altercations, there was a verbal thing that was in Scottsdale, Arizona. You know, a realtor was using racial epithets, pretty clear racial epithets. It wasn't anything that was subjective even. And the video went viral on YouTube and everything else. And it was all, that was the search term, realtor, Scottsdale, and racial epithets, or, whatever it is. And so from a brand protection, it's very important that NAR is protecting how realtors are perceived. And this doesn't do any of us, any good whatsoever when the headline becomes realtor does this and it goes viral, or, there's some other implications to it. So I'm saying that in that there's the positive social justice implications to the adoption of these modifications, as well as the practical and business implications to that. And so when I say that I think there is something in this for everybody, regardless of what your sort of political perspective on where NAR's jurisdiction in your life begins and ends, because I don't think any of us support regardless of your political thinking on this or your perspective on it, there's nobody that says, oh yeah, we ought to be able to, use words or phrases or do things like this. That's not even really the discussion. The discussion is, where does NAR's jurisdiction or the code of ethics jurisdiction in your lives begin, and where does it end? And so those two, the business and the legitimate social justice implications to all of this, I think has something for everybody, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of the benefits in my thinking. The concerns that I have are the subjectivity of some of this. And so again, as person who acts as legal counsel to our grievance committee, who considers these complaints as they come in the door, and or our professional standards committee, who comprise our ethics hearing panelists, imagine a scenario, again, because of the subjectivity, that somebody who takes the time to file a complaint that says, hey, this realtor did this, or here's a copy of a social media post that they made. They submitted an ethics complaint against one of our members under 10.5. And the grievance committee looks at this and goes, yeah, I get it's a little edgy, but it's not really, we don't view this as a 10.5 violation. And what that complainant is going to receive is a letter on CAR letterhead, or our local association letterhead, from the Realtor Association, basically saying, hey, we considered your complaint, we reviewed your complaint, and based on your complaint, we didn't think this was bad. Well, now this complainant, who clearly was aggrieved or felt aggrieved by whatever they were submitting, is going to be, running around and saying, hey, look, the realtors don't think this activity was bad. And again, there's shades of gray on all of this. And so that's a concern, is trying to make sure that we don't end up looking like the bad guys because we're doing a good thing, if that makes sense. And so that's the grievance committee level. The same thing on a hearing level. Let's say the grievance committee looks at it and says, yeah, based on the complaint, because remember, when a grievance committee considers a complaint, they don't have a response. They only have the complaint itself. And so it's in many cases very easy to push something along to an ethics hearing, at which time, in front of a hearing panel, they're going to have both the complaint as well as the response. And so they have a much broader and clearer perspective before they ultimately make a decision. But let's say that it goes then to a hearing panel and they decide, hey, this doesn't rise to the level of harassment or epithets or slurs. Well, now, once again, there's going to be an ethics hearing decision that says, hey, we didn't find this was a problem. And so the subjectivity of that concerns me a little bit. And we're going to see how this plays out going forward. In terms of actual implications, I can tell you guys, this went into effect in like mid-November, I think, of last year. Here we are in mid-March of this year, and we have not seen a single ethics complaint related to Article 10, Standard of Practice 10.5, any of it. And like I say, we've seen a lot of complaints in that time on a lot of different issues, but nothing related to this specifically. So knock on wood, I'm really hopeful that this is something that has created a lot of some stress and concern, but in the actual big picture, it's not something that's going to have an impact on our industry in a significant way. And to the extent that it's appropriate that it does, then awesome, great. I'll be glad we have it. And because those bad actors, from an objective standpoint, they bring the whole industry down. They have an impact on what we all do and the value of the realtor are, and everybody's perspective on what you guys do as professionals. So anyhow, that's it. My buddy Monica Panzer, who creates all this stuff for me, she created this right after. I don't know if you guys saw that YouTube video that was a Zoom call it was a court case. I think it was in Texas. But anyhow, there's very few things that made me fall out of my chair laughing. And if you haven't seen that, Google it, because it was really very funny. So, all right, I'm going to exit out of this. And Erica, would you prefer I take questions on SOP 10.5 now and move from there? Or do you want me to kind of go into the other aspects that I'm going to talk about?
It might be easier if we do questions on this and then questions after, if that's okay.
That works. Do we have any questions? I don't see any in the
So
chat.
I guess I was just going to open it up. Does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand, or you can put them in the chat section and we can address those right now. Did Denise get fined?
I'm not privy to that.
Okay. I was going to say, I don't know that either. Give 1 minute here. Anyone else? Any questions? Okay.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'll keep going. If you guys have more questions about this in a little bit, then, well, yeah, if you got fired, yeah, I'd love not to drag names necessarily through the mud on a public forum, but regardless, yeah, the broker who had the sign removal issue her employment was terminated not on the basis of her specific anything that hate speech or political speech. It was an employment termination based on the concepts of trespass and theft of personal property. I think was the justification that the brokerage firm had brought out. So anyhow, all right. So let's transition a little bit to the second area that I want to talk about, and that is the antitrust implications of everything. So this became an issue about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago exactly, and more of a discussion point and more of a concern for me when Zillow announced that it would be acquiring showing time. Do you guys use showing time in your marketplace? You do? Okay. So Zillow announced it was going to be acquiring showing time, and that created a real stink in the industry. I mean, everybody was very agitated by the fact that, you know, in the perspective on Zillow is, you know, they're well, you guys understand the perspective on Zillow from a general standpoint. But what it inspired essentially was a ton of primarily Facebook's the best and easiest example to use because of the way it's set up in terms of somebody makes a statement and then a whole bunch of people make comments. And so the you know, statements like, or Facebook posts from a realtor like, oh, I'm never going to use showing time again, or you know, we need to boycott showing time. Somebody's asking Erica for you to do something over there. I'm going to minimize the chat because there we go. We're going to boycott showing time, right? And then what would follow in these posts, particularly among well-connected or you know, heavy Facebook users, social media users, would be, you know, some cases dozens. I mean, I've seen hundreds of comments to that post basically saying, yeah, we're not using them anymore. No more, no more, no more. And I seem to be a repository for a lot of this stuff from brokers around the state and other places where people say, have you seen this? This is a concern, isn't it? And so I've seen quite a bit of it. And the problem is that that sort of behavior invokes some pretty significant antitrust concerns. And our industry right now is under an enormous microscope from a number of different perspectives as it relates to antitrust. And so then when we when we have an event like that that blows up and causes a whole bunch of people to, potentially create a group boycott, that is incredibly problematic, and in fact is probably great evidence for some of the lawsuits and other people that would love to see the realtor associations and our industry as a whole get rung up on antitrust sort of allegations. So antitrust, just as a very, very surface, cursory kind of overview, is meant to prevent unrelated market participants from doing things that could harm consumers. And so when I refer to unrelated market participants, I'm referring to this room. I don't know, I can't see you guys, but I know that, with 47, 48 participants in this thing, most all of you guys are not at the same brokerage firm. So you are all market participants in the Vail Board of Realtors in the Vail Valley, but you're unrelated because you're not in the same brokerage firm. And so because of that, you are not able, we know about commissions, right? We know that you guys couldn't get together in an association boardroom and say, in the Vail Valley, commissions are going to be $19.52 or $19,000 and $19,520, whatever it is. You can't get together and set commissions. We know that. I think everybody knows that. It's very clear. But in the same, it's price fixing essentially is the federal nomenclature for that. The other area that is of a big concern is group boycotts, and that is the exact same concern. It's just not as commonly acknowledged in our industry as being a significant concern. And so when we see a comment on social media primarily, and then a whole bunch of subsequent comments, often from your friends and colleagues who are unrelated market participants, it ends up becoming a great little and very public string of antitrust concern. And so that's the big issue. So I would encourage you guys as managing brokers to be mindful of your broker associates as it relates to things like this, whether it is the merger or that acquisition specifically, whether it's other mergers. I know in the Front Range, I see it a lot when it comes to what might be perceived as a discount brokerage firm or an alternative brokerage business model that is very commission and price forward, right? There's no such thing as a discount brokerage firm because there's no such thing as a market commission or a set commission. We know that, but there are a lot of brokerage firms, and I think it's an emerging industry business model of, flat rate, commission forward kind of marketing from a business model. And so when multiple brokerage firms, unrelated market participants, get together and say, hey, we're going to knock on these brokerage firms, or we're going to push away from them, that's another form of group boycott potentially. So the reason that this has become so important is because of all the other things that are going on in the microscope that is on our industry right now. So I do know, two lawsuits that are going on. There's two private action lawsuits, and these were filed. The first one was filed 2 years ago this month, March of 2019, in federal district court in Illinois. Morrill versus NAR, Home Services, Keller Williams, Realgy, and Remax. Right, so 5 total defendants. But NAR is kind of what I would say is the primary defendant in the matter, but there are 4 other co-defendants. And then there were also a bunch of named MLSs specifically, including a couple here in Colorado. And then there was another copycat lawsuit that was filed a couple of months later, all based in antitrust. These are class action lawsuits based in antitrust. And so these lawsuits are actively going on and have been, and they will continue to go on for the next several years because in the last, 6 months or a year, NAR and their co-defendants have filed, in both cases, motions to dismiss these lawsuits. And in both cases, those lawsuits have been, those motions that were filed by NAR and the co-defendants, those motions were dismissed. So the lawsuits are continuing forward actively and are in the phases of discovery. I do know that one of those law firms, or one of those class action lawsuits, it's being run by the exact same law firm out of Illinois that represented or that sued in federal court in a class action matter, Big Tobacco, a few years ago, and won pretty substantially. So tons of resources and tons of investment in this thing. And guess what? I also know from NAR that they have people that are actively monitoring social media for more evidence of antitrust. And that's where we get into some of these problems as these kinds of things occur. Now, let me also be clear. You guys are all entitled to your opinions individually, but the problem with Facebook specifically is the concept that you can say, hey, I'm never going to use this business again. You're free to do that. But the problem then becomes is the ability to comment, and that in the aggregate, those are what create the group boycotts. So by no means is this meant to say that you or your broker associates can't have their own opinions. And within your brokerage office, you are free to collude and conspire and price fix and boycott within your brokerage firm, because in that case, you are related market participants, right? I'm still not going to encourage the behavior, obviously, but you are related, and therefore the antitrust rules don't apply to you. But it's when it gets out into the broader community. So be mindful that these two lawsuits based in antitrust and class action, and they're going to be looking at some point in the next couple of years to be building their class and to be establishing their case. Those are actively in process, and they are actively developing evidence, let's say. So that's the first piece of it. The other reason that we're under an enormous microscope right now is because the NAR and DOJ announced so I'll even back up from that. So March and I think May of 2019 were the inception of those two lawsuits that were filed. And then in June of 2019, CoreLogic, who is the backbone of most of the MLSs in the entire country, they received a subpoena from the Department of Justice. And nobody knew exactly what was going on, because that's a federal law enforcement agency that was subpoenaing somebody. They don't have to answer any questions. They send a subpoena, and CoreLogic complied, basically saying, hey, send us all of your MLS records, but we're primarily focused on commissions and or on your cooperating commissions being offered. And so nobody knew up until end of November, beginning of December, just last year. It was announced that NAR and the DOJ had entered into the basis of a settlement of the DOJ investigation based in antitrust. And so that agreement is currently, like literally as we speak, being hammered out within the DOJ, and is going to be presented to NAR at some point. They said first quarter of 2021. So it should be in the next few weeks. But very quickly, the terms of this settlement agreement between NAR and the DOJ will be put into place, I would imagine no later probably than April, May of this year at the very latest. The actual final agreement is not out, but we do know there's two primary components. There's a number of components, but the two in our industry that I think are going to have an impact, the two pieces of the settlement, are going to be piece number one, that cooperating commissions that are being offered by a listing broker in the MLS, that has been for generations a private data field, right? That co-op commission number has been not available to syndicators, to non-participants in the MLS. They don't know what that number is. Well, that is going to change, and it's going to change quick. That will now become, in every realtor-owned MLS in the country, that will become a public data field. So when a consumer or another broker or whomever goes and Googles your property address or goes to your listing on some syndication site, in addition to the price and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and all of the public data fields that have been around for a long time, the cooperating commission being offered to a cooperating broker is going to be a public data field. So everybody's going to see it. And the concept there is that consumers ought to be able to see your information, what a buyer's agent is going to be compensated if they're bringing a buyer to the deal. That's change number one, and that has already been agreed to. The specifics of it are going to be hammered out, but there's not a lot of nuance to that expectation. It's going to be mandated. The second thing, and I'm waiting for some more details on how this all plays out, is that lockbox access cannot be precluded to non-MLS participants or board participants. It depends on the market. Different markets do it differently. Sometimes it's done through the board. Sometimes it's through the MLS. Sometimes it's some kind of hybrid. Sometimes it's done through a complete third party. But whatever it is, realtor membership, and so board membership or MLS participation cannot be a basis from excluding lockbox access to a licensed individual. And so the specific details and how that all works out, that's where I think we're going to have some more clarity when this final agreement actually gets pushed out. So stay tuned on that. But I have some concerns, and I think you guys will have some concerns potentially, because I think the interplay of those two items is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Because imagine now that you've got and I hear this a lot, Denver broker. I hear it happens in all markets, by the way. I hear, Pueblo's complaining about Colorado Springs brokers, and Vail's complaining about Denver, and Steamboat's complaining, it's whatever. It happens in every market. But imagine, just to use, your local market, Denver broker is able to now Google or look at, through a syndication, a public-facing website, a listing. Even though they're not a participant in the Vail MLS, they can see the basic property details and they can see the offered compensation. And so they know that, and then they also know that they can come to the market, bring their buyer, and that they can't be precluded from accessing a lockbox. And so those two things, I think what we're going to see more of are traveling realtors, traveling licensees potentially. And I have some concerns because of the competency issues that are there, and how our consumers going to be harmed by having these sort of traveling brokers. I've already had conversations with Marshall Waters, division director, kind of about the implications of this. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Now, remember, the competency rules that are promulgated by the state, by the Real Estate Commission, and enforced by the Division of Real Estate, those aren't to protect you. They're not to protect the market. They're not to protect you from people coming into your market and bringing buyers into your market. They're there to protect a buyer from being harmed because a licensee is not competent to get a deal done. In most cases, you guys as listing brokers, your sellers could give two hoots about whether the buyer or the buyer's broker is coming from Denver or coming from Mars. It just doesn't matter to them. They want to sell their house for as much money as possible. And so that's going to present an interesting challenge, I think, in some ways for you guys and for all markets, in terms of not allowing your fiduciary relationship or obligation to your sellers to be compromised because you're having to represent their best interest in a situation where you've got brokers coming from out of market potentially. So I'm not exactly sure how all of this plays out and how much scale and concern this might be, but I would say that those two pieces of things coming together are going to create a little bit more of that. The other concern that I have from this is that I think for buyer brokers particularly, commissions are going to become a much more front and center discussion at the inception of a transaction and potentially throughout a transaction, right? At the engagement of a client. I think buyers, because they're going to be, the commissions, the offered compensation is going to be so much more in front of them. I think it's going to drive more business models that are commission centric, commission forward, whether it's buyer rebates or doing something like that. I think it's also going to draw potentially a lot more buyers who look to be unrepresented and therefore want to get in the listing broker's pocket because they say, well, I know the commission being offered is X and I don't have a broker, so I'd like that commission being reduced from the purchase price or handed over as a seller concession, or in the event that the buyer's lender doesn't care, maybe as a rebate to the buyer, which is going to be pretty unlikely, I think, as a whole. But I think there's going to be, particularly for buyer brokers, a lot more buyers in your face related to commission and discussions about commissions. So those two things I think are coming, and how the market adapts and how the various markets adapt to those are going to be very interesting to watch play out over the coming, as soon as months, but certainly over the coming years as this becomes, fully implemented across all of our realtor-owned MLSs. So as a teaching point, what I would say in this, and I've said this before to brokers, and I think for you guys that are managing broker associates, this is going to be a super important piece of things, and that is, you'll get through this, and the market will get through this, and whatever changes come are going to be, everybody's going to adapt to. But in my view, there's three kinds of brokers. and this is, completely broad categorizations, but generally speaking, there's three kinds of brokers. There's your brokers who do not have a value proposition. They're terrible brokers. They're just cruddy brokers. They don't do a good job. They don't service their clients well. They don't know the market. They're, whatever, part-time. They're in and out. They're whatever it is. You guys probably all have pictures of people in your mind going, yeah, that's a cruddy broker. And no names, please. I don't want any more names on my chat box. But you get my point. They're not going to survive, right? They're just not, because the expectations are going to be super high if you're going to expect to earn a commission, and particularly what has been perceived as a full commission for your activities. The market's going to flush those people out, I think, a lot quicker. The second category of brokers are brokers who have a great value proposition and are really good at articulating their value proposition, right? They're good salespeople and they're good brokers. Those brokers are your biggest hitters in every market all year, all the time. They always will be. They always have been, right? They're good at articulating their value proposition, and they're good at delivering on their value proposition. They have one and they can talk about it. All right. They're going to survive and thrive under any market condition, under any changes that we may see. The third category, and this is the category that I feel really bad for, frankly. They have a value proposition. They're great brokers. They work really hard and they bring a lot of value to their client's transaction, but they're not great at selling it. They can't articulate it as well as they should, right? And because of that, they're going to be more challenged in terms of justifying the amount of compensation that they're being offered and therefore going to earn. I feel terrible for those people because they're just not, they haven't refined their value proposition, decided how they're going to sell their value proposition. That's the category that is going to be disrupted, I think, the most by this. And as a result, those people in that category need to focus on refining and articulating their value proposition. Everybody, 46 people on here right now, every single person that would take the time to listen to my blowhard ass go on a Friday morning at this time has a value proposition. You have one, you wouldn't be here. You've got a lot of colleagues in the market who are out doing other things, and good for them. That's all fine. And some of them probably have a value proposition and may not feel like they need this. But my point is everybody on here has one, and all of your value propositions might be incredibly different or nuanced or whatever it is. It's not always going to be the same value proposition that you're going to bring, but you have one. I would encourage you guys to be really, really focused, and for you managers to be really, really focused on your broker associates in helping them refine and articulate their value proposition. Because that's what's going to be the difference maker, I believe, in our industry over the coming years, as commissions and competition, I believe, is going to invariably increase. And the downward pressure, particularly for buyer brokers, on compensation, the way that they're going to be able to justify their compensation in any market condition, regardless of the downward pressure on commissions, is going to be by having a value proposition and being able to articulate and sell it. So really be thinking about that as you're coaching and mentoring your brokers going forward. I think getting from category 3 to category 2, which is having a value proposition and articulating that, being able to sell it and being good at that, that's going to be the difference maker for many, many people going forward. So that's kind of the antitrust piece of things. And please be cautious. Please be mindful of that. Again, I'm not meaning to imply that nobody can have a personal opinion. And in the first category, that your ability to have free speech and all those things aren't important. What I'm saying is that how we do things as an industry, we're under a microscope, and words matter, more perhaps than ever. And so that'll lead me to my very last short spiel on the third category thing, is that's just overall general social media use. We have this discussion about cancel culture. We're hearing that term thrown around all the time. And listen, I'm stammering because I got to go about this conversation very cautiously. This is not meant to imply that cancel culture is in some cases not justified, or there's elements of people being canceled that's not justified. What I'm trying to get at is that people are monitoring what you and your broker associates are doing. I have never seen, and I think most of you would agree, we have never been in a situation where the antenna of the public has been higher, and we've certainly never been in a situation where the ability of people to hit, type in a few words and hit tweet or snap or post on Facebook or whatever it is, where you've been able to reach such a vast audience of people who might take what you or your broker associates are saying in a bad way. All you guys have, all your broker associates have, is your reputation, right? All you have is, you're not given fat salaries and all kinds of perks and benefits and health insurance and bonuses and all these things. You're given your phone and your personalities and your value proposition. You're given what you've got because you're salespeople and you're 100% commission-based people. And what that really, really means is your reputation, particularly in a small-ish community like you have, is all you've got. It's the most important thing you've got. And so cancel culture or no cancel culture or, heightened sensitivity or no sensitivity, it is super important, more important than ever, because of the increase in the antenna, the people that are really watching for this stuff, to make sure that you're using, and your broker associates are using their social media in a manner that is flawless, right? And so please be mindful of that. Encourage your broker associates to be mindful of that, because it can destroy people, it can destroy careers, it can destroy your reputation. And like I say, that's all you got. That's it. You're not going to run from your reputation in this business. There are plenty of other brokers, realtors in the Vail Valley. If somebody has a whiff that something's not right with you, there's a lot of other opportunities. So be really harping on that for your broker associates in your office, that just related to the importance of being mature and responsible and articulate, and for all of these reasons. So anyhow, that's what I've got there, and I think I'm right about an hour. Is there questions or anything else going on in the chat room?
So we have one question. Can the cooperating broker commission be lowered for an out-of-market broker?
Yeah.
If so, how will this be disclosed?
Thank you for asking the question, Tim. Good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because it's an important piece here. Yes, of course, because guess what? The only people that you are offering compensation to through your MLS is to other MLS participants. Nobody else. Everybody else may know what it is, but the only people you are obligated to compensate through your offer of compensation through your MLS are other MLS participants within the Vail MLS. You have offered zero to anybody else in the world. Now, they all may know and will know what that offer is to the other Vail MLS participants, but please don't do this, because I'm hearing about some MLSs doing this, saying like, oh, to Vail MLS participants, the compensation is $10, and to non-Vail MLS participants, the compensation is $7, right? There's no need to do that, because guess what? $10 is the offer of compensation to Vail MLS participants, and you've offered zero to any non-Vail MLS participant. So in terms of disclosure, I think what you would say is, well, a couple of things. I do hear about in certain markets, including your own, where I'll get a frantic call on the hotline from an out-of-market MLS participant, or non-MLS participant, let's say, and they get the settlement statements as an example, and they go, oh my God, we're supposed to close tomorrow. I just got the settlement statements and there's no commission being paid to me. And I'm like, okay, are you a participant in the MLS? Well, no. Do you have a commission agreement? Well, no. Do you have any other writing or any other evidence that the listing broker has agreed to pay you, or that the seller has agreed to pay you? Well, no. Well, guess what? You're probably out of luck, right? There's no offer of compensation that was made to you. So an out-of-market broker better be learning how to address their commission concerns, either through the contract, and there's only a narrow way that can be done appropriately under license law, or through a separate commission agreement, or in some other manner, because you've offered zero. But you get into serious other trouble if you're a listing broker and if you're writing a distinction between in like the broker remarks or something, between what you're going to pay an out-of-market broker versus an in-market broker. So don't do that. There's no need to. You've offered zero to anybody else. You've offered whatever you've offered to the participants only within your MLS.
right. Is there any other questions out there? You can raise your hand.
You expect, there's somebody said, do you expect a variable rate commission will be public information? Don't know. I don't know how, again, that's one of the nuances of the settlement. The only thing that's been announced is the very basic sort of threshold terms of the settlement. So that the devil will be in the details there. I'm not sure. Let me also just say, since this is kind of off topic, but I think it's important for you guys. Federal law, and this is concerning me, frankly, a little bit, because it just passed the House earlier this week, but something called the PRO Act. PRO is the acronym, PRO Act. And I'd encourage you to Google it, but there's a very legitimate push to eliminate independent contractor status in a pretty substantial way, which for you guys who are broker owners or employing brokers, that's going to have some implications in perhaps more implications than any of the other stuff we've talked about. Now, like I said, it passed the House of Representatives earlier this week. It's going to the Senate, where I think there's some legitimate concerns about its passage. But for those of you, I mean, there was an Inman article that came out a couple days ago that highlighted some of the concerns. But essentially, there's this sort of ABC test that's pretty well accepted, and essentially brokers have been either a specific statutory exemption under IRS rule or under state law. Real estate brokers from the applicability of employee versus independent contractor. But this bill would potentially make real estate broker associates have to go from independent contractor to become an employee. And keep your eye on that one. I know NAR is actively working on that, because just imagine if you had to start paying minimum wages to your broker associates and actually controlling their activities, doing withholdings, unemployment taxes, insurance, all of that good stuff. That's kicking around out there in our halls of the U.S. Congress. So keep your eyes open on that one.
I have a couple that have their hands raised.
Okay.
Maybe we can address those, and then I don't know if you've got another meeting, so I don't want to hold you up too long here. Do you have time for a couple more?
Sure, yeah. Okay. Let's do the two that
are... John Wendt has his hand raised, so I'm going to allow you to talk, John, and ask your question. So just let me get you there. I think you should be able to talk now. Let's see.
John, there you go.
I unmuted. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I guess my question is, our listing contract, Scott, doesn't it state we'll pay brokers outside our firm a certain amount, and it doesn't delineate whether they're going to be participants in our MLS or not a member of our MLS?
It does, yeah. Thank you, John.
And so my concern is by saying that we're paying a broker different without getting the seller's permission in our listing contract, wouldn't that be a breach of duties to our seller then if we paid a broker a different amount?
100%, John. I'm sort of I'm glossing over the fact that while you have not offered compensation, whatever changes to the compensation that have been discussed with your seller would need to be memorialized through an amend extend to the broker agreement or discussed with your seller. And I alluded to this earlier, but I didn't maybe flesh it out as much. And John, thanks for the question, and all of your service for many, many years to the Realtor Association, as well as a commissioner currently in Colorado. So is the interface with or what I said was essentially that in most cases, your seller doesn't care if the buyer or buyer's broker is from Denver or from Mars. Their concern is selling their house. And so making sure that you are coordinating any modifications to the offered compensation and or treating any buyer or buyer broker differently based on where they are from, that's something that you really need to be checking both your written agreement as well as your actual fiduciary and or uniform duty obligations. And so thank you, John, for forcing me to flesh that out a little bit more. But yeah, don't mistake the fact that the offer of compensation doesn't extend, but you do have a actual contractual relationship with your seller that is going to need to be addressed in one form or another.
And I do agree with you. The seller doesn't care where the buyer comes from. They really just care about getting their house sold. So that's just a discussion I feel has got to go on with the seller when he lists the property about the compensation to non-participants.
100%. When you list the property, or to the extent that after that a buyer is coming in, then whether you're doing it through an amend extend to the brokerage agreement, that's the only way that I would ever encourage you to do it. But to and to make sure that you're memorializing that, because as John well knows from sitting as a commissioner for I think 3+ years now, the importance of a licensee adhering to their brokerage relationship and the duties that are expected there. So, and I think, I don't know, John, do you have any comments related to the competency concerns of traveling realtors and some of the stuff that I think we might see some additional activities occurring on? I'm guessing that's a no.
I was gonna say, I think I might have muted him on Excel.
I just am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Thanks, Erica. Anyway, I thought you covered that really well. We have a concern, obviously, that people come from outside our area and don't have a clue about so many things, and they're not competent. I'm not speaking as a commissioner, but to me, that's a big issue that we certainly haven't discussed that internally in our office of how to deal with that. And I think that's a conversation that we should have with our sellers about brokers coming in that don't know the market and don't know the nuances of what goes on, whether it be transfer fees, whether it be water rights or whatever, the rules of just what happens in certain subdivisions are just met, and rights of first refusal, etc. So I just think that's a real issue to have that discussion. And I do want to just clarify, I'm just speaking as a managing broker, not the commission. So.
Yeah, a very experienced managing broker. And so, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, John, but anyhow, thank you for that. Is there another question?
Yep, we have one more. Jay Raiola, I'm gonna allow you to talk here and ask your questions. So Jay, I think you should be unmuted.
Yep.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. The question is, I'm doing a transaction right now. The seller is a broker. It's his property. He has a bunch of rentals and he's selling one, and he doesn't want his brokerage involved, including on the commission agreement. So I suggested that he does include his brokerage because I thought he should, but I figured I'd let him deal with his broker. His broker told him, at least as far as the commission agreement is concerned, that it's like a FSBO, so he doesn't need to note that he's part of that brokerage. And then as far as a contract, it's just between my buyer and the seller. I guess I'm just want to make sure I'm okay, regardless of what he decides to do.
Well, okay, so whether or not the transaction flows through the brokerage firm is a question for his brokerage firm. In other words, most brokerage firms, and I think it's probably a good office policy to have, require that a person doing a transaction on their own behalf as a buyer or a seller, they carry that transaction on through the brokerage firm. And then there's often some, reduction in fee or split of commission or waiver of commission or whatever, but that's between him and his brokerage firm. To the extent that he's acting consistently with whatever his brokerage firm's policy is, then yes, he could be a for sale by owner, essentially acting as an individual because it's his own, he's a principal on the transaction. So he could treat it as, or you could treat him as a FSBO, and essentially not do it through his brokerage firm, presumably use the open source commission approved forms and not be on brokerage firm letterheads and keep it separate. The one important thing that he would have to do is disclose within the contracting instrument, so in the additional provisions or something, that he is a licensed individual in the state of Colorado. But other than that, as long as he's being consistent with his brokerage firm policy, then he could be a FSBO.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think that's all we have right now for questions. I know we want to provide our little board update here too. So I think I'm going to cut the questions at this point. So.
Cool. Thank you, guys. If you have questions or if somebody I didn't get to somebody, then the Card Legal Hotline is a great resource for you. And reach out there, and you can, assuming I'm not answering, get a competent attorney to answer a question for you. So it's good to see everybody. Thank you guys so much for putting that on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for
Thank
being
you.
here. Great information, that's for sure.
You bet. Have a great weekend, guys.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Scott, again for being here. You always provide such important and relevant information for us to share with our members. So we very much appreciate you and appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here. We know that your time is valuable, so we'll get this board update going so you can get on with your day. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kevin Kubert. I am your 2021 chair of the board. I'm very excited for the year, although it's a little different than some of the previous years. I'm very excited to do this and to volunteer and be in the position here. At any rate, so let's get started. The office renovation. The VBR office got an upgrade. We are extremely excited about it. The timing worked out well for the project because the staff was already working from home and our classes have been online. The renovation looks great and is excellent for the future of our organization. One thing I'd like to mention is, as part of the project, we updated the heating system. As part of this, we also got a global plasma system, an air purifying system that kills 99.4% of viruses, including the coronavirus, which helps guests coming into our office feel even more comfortable. We are looking forward to having everyone back in the office soon. We have a quick video here to show the changes. In the upcoming summer months, we will be scheduling an open house to welcome everyone in to see the updated space. And Eric is going to pull up a video here for us. Erica, are you sharing that?
I'm not able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we all stop it and we'll share it in an email.
Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. Free education. This is big news. The Vail Board of Realtors Board of Directors voted to provide all VBR education classes to our members for free this year. That's right. You heard it, for free. Our budget allows us to offer this opportunity for 2021, and we encourage everyone to take advantage of this benefit. We seek to provide the best continuing education program to enhance the real estate profession. Currently, the Division of Real Estate allows us to host our education live online on Zoom, and we will be doing this until at least May of 2020. Doing this online and Zoom until May of 2021. Over the last year, diversity, inclusion, and equity have been a big topic, and we are offering the NAR at Home with Diversity certification on June 23rd and 24th. Falls right in line with everything that Scott's been talking about. This will also be a free course, and we hope that you encourage your agents to take this. So please mark your calendars for June 23rd and 24th. Another great program is the Fairhaven Simulator provided by NAR. I personally completed this and highly recommend it to everyone. It provides about a half dozen scenarios for you to go through. It's really pretty fascinating. You can access it by going to fairhaven.realtor, and then you just log in with your realtor credentials. All right, upcoming events. Our general membership meeting is coming up on April 7th. This will be a hybrid event streamed on Zoom, and a limited number of attendees will be at the Westin. We have Elliot Eisenberg, the Bowtie Economist, which will be an entertaining and very fun presentation. We did have him here a couple of years ago, and he's actually a very exciting person to listen to talk about the economy with as much fun as that can be. Now I'd like to turn it over to Chad Cremonese, the 2021 Vail MLS Chair.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We appreciate the insightful update, and thank you again, Scott, too, for providing the relevant update on the NAR-DOG agreement. And we at the VMLS want to ensure everyone here that with the upcoming changes coming from NAR, when we do receive them, that we'll be ready. It's on our radar as a board, and be prepared to adapt as necessary. So, ultimately, a big part of that settlement is going to be realtors cooperating with realtors. And one of the big announcements earlier in February, on February 16th, we integrated showing time into the MLS. It's a member benefit that allows our members to schedule and manage appointments with ease. You'll find it up there on the listings itself in the MLS. And we feel this is an excellent benefit for all of our MLS subscribers. So, at the same time, we're also aware of the acquisition of Zillow purchasing showing time. Certainly created a buzz in the industry, and the MLS, we treat this like any other vendor partnership announcement. Showing time is committed to operating as an open platform for agents, brokers, and other MLSs. And they've notified us that their privacy policies do not intend to change, and the information will be kept private. In addition to that, we have some new benefits that we'll be reviewing this year. So be on the lookout for more MLS benefits. Our operation committee is going to be reviewing some great opportunities coming. And lastly, more training. I want to remind everyone that Mike Fox, our illustrious MLS director, is offering Flex MLS training. And that training he's going to provide on MLS Mondays. And you can jump on and get any MLS questions that you may have answered. So in addition to that training that he's providing on Mondays, there's also going to be additional MLS classes scheduled through April, and all MLS classes have always been free. So again, to our commitment to providing education to the membership. And last but not least, I do want to also mention that Mike has done some information on training on showing time. But if there's an office that does need some personalized showing time training, reach out to Mike directly in regards to that as well. Thank you very much. And I believe Bev Trout is going to talk to us about the VBR Foundation.
Bev, you're muted. There you go.
All right, thank you. I'll say again what I said to nobody, to the air. I feel very privileged to be serving alongside of Kevin and Chad and the terrific staff that we have at the VBR. I've been on the foundation for a long time, and I'm just so proud of the people that have served in the past, because they put in place ongoing activities, and we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So in the last year, we still had money that was available for nonprofit organizations, and those were given out. I think we gave out 25,000 just recently to support organizations that work for no profit. They're mainly volunteers. The other thing is the scholarship committee and helping our young people in a year of great challenge for families to put their kids into college or higher learning institutions. So very proud of that. But I'm going to close with this because I have to make it fast to get inside of our 1 minute I got. Don't forget that this is not just for realtors that we have a foundation. This is for our community. If someone is challenged with a personal medical, they have run into an accident. I cite the tremendous upheaval of the family in Gypsum, where there was a gas explosion and they lost a mom and a wife in that, and we were there very, very quickly. So get a hold of Erica. If anything comes up in the community and you know about it, reach out, because we're going to be there for the community members. It's not just for realtors. Having said that, I, again, am proud to be a part of this organization. We've come so far in my years of belonging to it, and I'm proud to be one of you. That's it. Did I make it?
I think so. Kevin, do you want to just say quickly, jump on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you all so much for being here. And, you know, it wouldn't be a normal VBR meeting without asking you all, if you haven't yet, please donate to Rpac. You know, with the funds that have gone to Rpac have enabled us to get back out and work. You know, the fact that we were declared essential service workers was a milestone for our industry. So if you haven't been able to donate yet, you know, and for those of you that had, you know, really good years last year, I know there's a lot of you out there. I would really encourage you to donate. Even a small amount is certainly better than nothing. And I thank you in advance for doing that.
All right. So it looks like we have a question from Mark Gordon. So I'm going to unmute him. Mark, I'm going to unmute you here right now. Okay.
Hello. You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Mark.
Perfect. That was a great meeting. That was so informative. Thank you guys so much. And these are great meetings. I just wanted, it's not really a question, just wanted to quickly mention, hopefully I'm not stepping on any toes, that I am the 2021 Colorado Residential Real Estate Council president. The RRC is the organization, the umbrella organization that manages the Certified Residential Specialist, the CRS designation. So if anybody has any questions or wants a presentation or wants to talk about that, feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. And we do have actually some classes that I think they're already on our calendar, but Mel's been working hard to get them on the calendars, the CRS classes. So those will also be free. Great classes. And, you know, Mark is a great representative of them. So
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone, you know, for your time today. And I think, you know, the information was so great that Scott provided. There's just been so many changes, I guess, since this fall with NAR. So it's just really, I opened my eyes a little bit more too, to some of the things to be aware of. So thank you for being here.